Hi, my name's Joy. At my sister's wedding, the one I helped pay for, they had me watching strangers' dogs in the lobby. No seat at the table, no thank you, not even my name in the program. Then I found out they used my signature to take credit for the entire catering contract. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just canceled everything. But here's what no one asked. What kind of family edits you out of their story while still spending your money? And what happens when the quiet one finally says no? I pulled up to the venue a few minutes past 3. The heat hadn't quite broken yet, and the Georgia air clung to my skin like a second layer. Spanish moss draped the iron gates like it was performing for a postcard. The estate was beautiful, grand, elegant, exactly the kind of place my sister had always dreamed of. It looked like it belonged to a magazine spread, not a family like ours. No one greeted me when I stepped out of my rental. No valet, no clipboard, not even a glance from the staff. I wasn't expecting a red carpet, but when you footed 70% of the catering bill, you'd think someone would remember your name, or at least offer a glass of water. I smiled at a passing florist, adjusting her clipboard and headset. She didn't look up, so I walked. Alone. Inside, everything smelled like expensive perfume and peonies. I took a slow breath, not because I needed one, but because I felt the tension sitting tight between my collarbone and jaw. I knew what was coming. I just hadn't expected it to be this blatant. Near the check-in table, a young woman with a headset looked up. Name? Joy, I said. She paused, tapped something on her iPad, tilted her head. Sorry, Joy? I nodded, slow and deliberate. Oh, I think you're listed under lobby guest coordination. Right this way. No further explanation, no raised brow, no apology, just the click of her heels against polished tile as I followed her down a hallway and into what looked like a glorified waiting area. There were kennels, leashes, a water bowl with a paw print sticker. You'll be helping monitor the guest dogs today, she said, already halfway back down the hall. I stood there, stunned. Before I could say a word, someone handed me a leash. A Yorkie, panting in a rhinestone harness, wagged its tail at me. Marcy said you're great with animals, the guest beamed. So sweet of you to do this. Sweet. The word rattled in my ribs like a loose screw. I turned and saw Marceline, my sister, gliding across the marble. She looked like a bridal catalog cover. Tight curls pinned back just enough, high neckline, diamond studs that probably weren't rented. She called out, loud enough for anyone within 50 feet to hear. Joy, can you hold down the fort here? I'm swamped with seating stuff. I didn't answer. What was the point? There it was. In one sentence, one performance, she turned me from the sister who helped fund her wedding into the woman who watched dogs. By sunset, I had a full set. A golden retriever with anxiety. A pug that wheezed when anyone walked by. 2 mutts who barked at their own reflections. Not once did someone ask why I was in the lobby. Not once did anyone say thank you. When dinner was announced, I peeked through the glass. Long white tables, hanging candles, laughter bouncing off every surface. I looked down at my dress, slate blue silk, chosen to match the wedding palette. It was now marked with paw prints and dried slobber. I smoothed it out anyway, like that would change anything. Through the glass, I saw them raising glasses, forks, eyebrows. I saw Marcy next to her new in-laws. I saw our mother dabbing her eyes. I paid for the wine. I paid for the flowers. I paid for the chairs they were sitting in, but I wasn't invited to sit down. A staff member brought me a boxed meal, cold chicken breast, and 2 limp asparagus stalks. The box said, vendor, dietary, none. I opened it slowly, hands steady, face blank. A man in a beige suit leaned over and whispered, You're doing a fantastic job. What company are you with? I forced a smile. Inside, something gave way. Not loudly, not all at once, but like ice cracking underfoot. Slow, steady, inevitable. They didn't forget me. They made a choice. And I was going to make one too. Instead, I stayed seated, and watched the chaos unfold without lifting a finger. A server scrambled to pick up silverware that had clattered across the tile. A glass rolled gently until it tapped against the leg of my chair. Somewhere behind me, someone muttered, "This place was supposed to be 5 stars?" And laughter followed, like a nervous aftershock. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. The voice that had sliced me clean out of the family's narrative now called my name like I was part of the staff. And yet, not once, had that voice uttered mine into a microphone, under twinkling lights, in front of the crowd that clapped at every name but mine. I remember sitting straighter, not to be seen, but to be steady. They didn't get to watch me flinch. The MC's voice still rang in my ears. A special thanks to the amazing people who made today happen. To my beautiful bridesmaids, the event team, our brilliant photographer, and of course, Marceline's best friend / planner / savior, Elise. Each name earned applause. Each smile felt rehearsed. And I sat there, the woman who'd wired over $17,000 2 months prior so that every chair, plate, and candlelit centerpiece could exist. When the thank yous ended, so did something inside me. They didn't skip me by accident. They skipped me because it was easier that way. I wasn't decoration. I wasn't a checkbook in heels. But to them, I wasn't worth the syllables. Later, someone from the catering staff handed me a second box. This one marked "Staff, no allergies." She looked confused, even embarrassed, and said, "Sorry, the kitchen had extras. They assumed you were with the crew. Want it?" I didn't correct her. I just nodded and took it. There was no place to sit near the ballroom that didn't feel like I was trespassing. So I walked to the far side of the venue, past the floral arch and fake smile photo shoots, until I found a stone bench half hidden behind a row of hedges. I peeled open the box. Dry bread, iceberg lettuce drowning in dressing, and a chicken breast that tasted like obligation. As I picked at it, I could hear the band starting up inside. Laughter carried on the breeze. I chewed slower, thought harder. The most expensive thing I ever bought was a place at the table. And they still told the story like I never showed up. A man, I couldn't have placed him, wandered near with a glass of wine and looked genuinely pleased to see me. "You're doing such a fantastic job," he said. "Are you with logistics or floral?" I held his gaze. "Something like that," he smiled warmly. "People like you keep weddings together. It's all the little things, you know. Unsung heroes." Unsung. I nodded, polite. He meant no harm, but every syllable stung like lemon juice on a cracked lip. Not just invisible, replaceable, rewritten. I thought of the Google Doc I'd helped build for Marcy's seating chart, the spreadsheets I cleaned up for her RSVP tracker, the late-night call when she asked me to reformat her welcome speech because your tone is more professional. And yet, here I was, eating behind hedges with a boxed salad and a nameless badge in everyone's mind. They were writing a story I wasn't in. Worse, they gave my lines to someone else. From across the lawn, I could hear my sister laughing. Real, full laughter, the kind she used when she knew eyes were on her. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice or stomp or cry. I calculated. A woman once told me, if they won't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. But maybe you don't need the table at all. Maybe you just need to own what you brought. As the sky dimmed and the lanterns flickered on, I walked back toward the lobby. One of the dogs, a little scruffy terrier, licked my hand as I sat beside him again. It was oddly grounding. Uncomplicated affection. No angle, no script. A loud crash came from the dining area. Plates, probably. Someone shouted, "Get the coordinator!" Marcy's voice followed, sharp and ringing. "Joy, can you help?" I didn't answer. I stayed still. The terrier's head rested on my knee. I stroked his ears, slow and steady. I'd been erased in front of everyone. They thought I'd just fall in line again, like always. But I wasn't falling anymore. And mine, as of this moment, was no longer to stay silent. I stayed by the lobby for a little longer, long enough for the noise from the reception to fade into an indistinct hum, like traffic outside a closed window. Then, when the last song of the evening faded into polite applause, and forks clinked against empty dessert plates, I slipped out the side gate toward the guest rooms. No one noticed. That part didn't surprise me. Back in my suite, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed twice. I didn't rush to look. I knew exactly what it would be. Sure enough, first a text from Mom. "Don't cause a scene today. We all have roles to play." Then another, from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey, are you coming back in? Cake's about to be cut." I deleted both. My fingers hovered for a second on the home screen, then tapped into a photo album I hadn't opened in weeks. There it was, a picture of the lilac dress. I'd had it made when Marcy asked me to be her maid of honor. Back then, she'd insisted it had to be custom, had to match the palette she called modern French garden with a hint of southern warmth. She'd sent me samples, Pinterest boards, even exact heel heights. The boutique had been small, hidden on a side street near my apartment in Austin. The seamstress, an older woman with a strong accent, had smiled at me as I stood on a block in front of mirrors. I remember thinking how elegant I looked, how for once I might belong in the middle of a room instead of the sidelines. 3 weeks later, I got the call. "Hey, quick thing. My college roommate's flying in from Barcelona at the last minute. Total surprise. She's basically family." I thought, maybe she could stand with me? You'd still be part of everything, of course, just not in the photo lineup. You understand, right? I had said, of course. But it wasn't true. I didn't understand. I didn't agree. I didn't even believe her. But I said yes, because that's what was expected. Saying yes had always been easier than being accused of making things harder. The dress stayed at the boutique. I never picked it up. She never asked. Weeks passed, and the rehearsal dinner came and went without my name on the invite. Apparently, only bridal party and partners. The bridesmaids posted a boomerang on Instagram, clinking glasses and wearing silk robes with Team Marcy embroidered across their backs. Not once was I tagged. A few days before the wedding, I'd helped set up Zoom for our elderly aunt, who couldn't travel. Marcy handed me her iPad to test the camera and mic. While adjusting settings, I noticed a chat tab blinking. I didn't mean to click it. It just happened. The thread was titled Wedding Brain Trust. And there it was, scrolling back a few messages. "Let's not include Joy on this. She always gets emotional." "Yeah, she'll turn it into a thing, again." "We just want this weekend to be peaceful. Don't poke the bear." I sat there holding the iPad, hands oddly calm, eyes blinking slower than usual. I wasn't even angry in that moment, just hollow. That thread confirmed what I hadn't let myself name for years. I wasn't the complicated one. I wasn't a problem. I was simply inconvenient to their narrative. They didn't push me out once. They never made room. And once you realize you've been orbiting a family that never fully let you in, something shifts. You stop begging to land. You just drift, on purpose. I remembered being 19, missing Thanksgiving because of a paper deadline, and waiting all night for someone to call and ask if I was okay. No one did. When I brought it up later, Mom said, "We assumed you were busy. We didn't want to bother you." They always found a way to make the absence mine to carry. People like me. We build stories in our heads to survive the silence. We tell ourselves maybe they just forgot. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they didn't mean it. Because that's easier than admitting you were never really part of the plan. Lying in bed now, with the soft glow of a lamp and the hum of a far-off elevator, I pulled out a notebook I kept in my travel bag. No frills, just lined pages and a black cover. I opened to a blank page and wrote, "They never pushed me out. They left the door cracked and told me I was the one who refused to walk in." The pen felt heavier in my hand than usual. Somewhere, probably back in the ballroom, they were raising flutes of champagne, toasting love, laughter, and the edited version of family they'd chosen to believe in. That version didn't include me, and for the first time, I wasn't trying to change that. And the best part? They wouldn't even realize what I'd done until it was too late. The next morning started earlier than I expected. I hadn't planned to be awake before the sun, but my body had decided sleep was optional. I sat on the edge of the bed again, this time not with a notebook in hand, but with my phone. I was rereading the contract, my contract for the catering service. Every line, every term, every dollar amount had come from me. My signature was right there, next to the wire confirmation for the first deposit. It was hard to describe what I felt. Not anger. At least not the loud, slamming door kind. It was quieter, more surgical. The kind that made you want to start a spreadsheet. The kind that came from betrayal, with a veneer of good intentions. I closed the file and opened my email. Not to send anything yet, just to be ready. Mid-morning, I headed back down toward the side lawn. Marceline was giving directions to the staff while pretending not to be giving directions. That's always been her style. Managing people like a hostess, smiling as she orders them around. A man in a crisp white shirt, clipboard in hand, approached me with a grin. "You're Joy, right? The sister?" he asked. I nodded. "I just wanted to say, it's been great working with your sister on this. She's a real professional, total command of detail. She really pulled this off." My mouth tightened. "Did she mention who paid for the food?" His eyes flickered. "Oh, well, the contract's under her name now. She sent us an updated authorization last month. Full control passed to her team." He meant it casually. He didn't know what he was saying. But I did. She had erased me, paperwork and all. The girl who used to ask me to write her college essays had now put her name over mine. Literally. I managed a smile. "Thanks for letting me know." Walking away, I spotted two of the bridesmaids chatting by the mimosa bar. I hadn't seen them since the rehearsal I was never invited to. As I passed, I heard one of them say, "We'll just keep the brunch menu light. Elise already handled the guest count. Joy's not in the dock anyway." No whisper, no hesitation. Just spoken plainly, like I wasn't there. And I didn't even bother to respond. I'd heard enough. "We thought you knew, and it wasn't personal, over the years, to know they only say that when they get caught." Back in the main house, I sat in one of the hallway nooks where the Wi-Fi was strongest. My fingers moved without hesitation. I opened a text thread with Marceline. "You took credit for the catering I paid for. I'm giving you 24 hours to correct that in your speech tonight." I watched the screen. The typing dots showed up quickly. Her reply. "It's not about credit. Don't ruin this weekend over something so small." So small. Right. The next few minutes passed in a kind of cold clarity. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That text told me everything. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't forgotten. She made a choice. And now, so would I. I closed the thread, leaned back, and opened the contract file again, scrolling to the clause on non-disclosure, on breach of agreement, on primary authority. I highlighted 3 lines and copied them into a new draft. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And it wasn't about vengeance. It was about math. I had made a transaction. They had defaulted. As I was finishing, my phone vibrated again. Another message. This one from my mother. "Let's keep peace, okay? You're family. No need for drama." Drama. That word again. The favorite label of people who hurt you quietly and then ask you to bleed quietly too. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then placed the phone face down on the side table. I opened my laptop. The email to the catering company was still in draft. All that remained was to attach the proof, sign, and send. If they wouldn't give me my name, then they'd lose the benefit of it. And this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet while they dined on my generosity. The ballroom was already buzzing by the time I arrived. String lights flickered overhead, casting a glow that made everyone look a little more polished than they really were. Waiters weaved between tables like chess pieces, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres. Marceline stood in the center of it all, laughing a little too loud at something someone said. her champagne flute perfectly tilted in one hand. I was told I'd get to speak before the toasts. Just 1 minute, her exact words. A little thank you from you would mean a lot, she'd texted earlier that morning. But as I hovered near the small stage, I felt the shift in energy. The MC grinned wide, lifted his mic, and announced, "Let's raise our glasses to love, laughter, and a lifetime of memories. That concludes our speeches. Please enjoy your meal." Applause, music, forks hitting china. No mention of me. Again. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I simply stepped back into the crowd, unseen as usual, and let them sip on the wine I paid for. 15 minutes later, I found a quiet spot outside the venue's side garden and dialed the catering office. I needed confirmation. Something in my gut already knew, but I wanted to hear it out loud. The assistant on the other end, a young guy with a professional tone and poor timing, said cheerfully, "Hi, Joy. Let me just pull up the account here. Oh, looks like there was a name transfer. A Marceline Garrow submitted an amended authorization. It shows she's the main point of contact now. That was updated 2 weeks ago." My chest didn't tighten. My breath didn't stutter. I just nodded to myself. "Can you check the authorization signature?" I asked. Yeah. Looks digital. Matches the original file. Signed, Joy Garrow." They'd used my e-signature. I ended the call politely. Then I sat on a low stone wall in the garden, right beneath a patch of fairy lights, and looked down at my hands. She didn't just want credit. She wanted ownership. She didn't just forget me. She removed me. That kind of erasure isn't accidental. It's curated. 10 minutes later, I found her behind the tent, taking selfies with 2 of her bridesmaids. I waited for them to step away before I approached. She didn't even seem surprised to see me. "You look tired," she said, not kindly, just observational, like she was checking off a box. "You changed the billing," I said, "and you cut me from the program." Her eyes rolled. Actually rolled. "Joy, it's a wedding, not a court deposition. Don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said evenly. "I'm finishing it." She let out a laugh, dry, mocking. "Come on, you're really gonna make a thing out of this?" "This isn't a thing," I said. "It's theft, and I have every record to prove it. I gave you the opportunity to make it right, quietly. You chose not to." She folded her arms. "It's not that deep. You're making it dramatic." I stepped closer, not aggressive, just close enough that she'd feel the difference between me and the version of me she thought still existed. "This isn't drama. This is documentation." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For once, she looked unsure. Then one of her bridesmaids called her name, and like flipping a switch, she pasted on a smile and walked away, arm in arm with someone who thought she was lovely. Back inside the reception, people were laughing, music was climbing toward its crescendo, and the smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air. I sat down at an empty corner table and opened my phone. The contract file blinked up at me like an old friend. My name was still there, legal, dated, undeniable. In a separate email draft, I attached the original agreement, the payment receipts, and the email trail that traced every decision back to me. Subject line, Notice of Service Withdrawal. Immediate. I paused for one breath, then hit send. Let them enjoy the first course. It would be their last with my name attached. And when the silence hit their pockets, suddenly my voice mattered. The next course didn't arrive on time. At first, it was subtle. A few guests looked around, wondering why the carving station sat unmanned. Then whispers started floating from table to table. "Where's the staff? Did someone forget the pasta?" One woman flagged down a passing server and asked about the missing entree options. He smiled awkwardly, then disappeared into the kitchen. I kept my seat, eyes forward, lips pressed. Then came the moment I'd anticipated. Right on cue. Across the room, Marceline stood near the head table, adjusting her veil and laughing a little louder than necessary. But her smile faltered when she noticed the confused expressions rippling through the guests. A man, likely the father of the groom, turned to her with a raised brow. "What's going on with the food? The service just stopped." She blinked, then looked around. I saw it then, her realizing something was off. But she didn't connect the dots yet. Instead, she responded with a tone that carried farther than she thought. "Joy had one thing to manage. Honestly, I should have handled it myself." Heads turned. My name hung in the air like humidity before a storm. The silence that followed didn't last long. Someone near the back table gave a light chuckle. Others just looked at me, some puzzled, some curious. I didn't flinch. It wasn't just the public blame that stung. It was the casual way she tossed it, as if my only value was the job she'd reassigned me. As if my existence in this entire event was tied to one obligation, and failing, that meant I failed entirely. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I stood and slipped out through the nearest side door, heels muted against the stone pathway as I made my way to the garden. The air outside felt thicker, but at least it wasn't full of manufactured smiles and champagne breath. Once out of sight, I pulled out my phone. No trembling hands, no shallow breathing, just the steady rhythm of consequence. I opened my inbox, found the catering contact labeled Operations, and began to type. "Effective immediately, I am canceling service under the original agreement. Your team is not liable for any additional events beyond the reception dinner. Final payment will not be processed." Attached were the contracts, payment records, and digital signature logs. All of it, locked in place like well-positioned chess pieces. I pressed send. Back inside, the shift was instant. The kitchen door stayed closed. Staff members clustered near the prep hallway, whispering into headsets. Then chaos. A flustered coordinator approached Marceline with a tight-lipped expression. She whispered something, and Marceline's face changed. Not confused, furious. Her hand flew to her chest, as if physically wounded. "What do you mean they're leaving?" she hissed. "Who gave them that order?" The coordinator leaned in closer. I couldn't hear it from the garden, but I saw the words land. Marceline spun on her heel and stormed out the back, scanning the perimeter until she caught sight of me, seated beneath a small tree, sipping from a bottle of water I'd brought earlier. Her steps were sharp, but I didn't bother standing. She stopped a few feet from me, hands clenched. "You sent the cancellation?" I tilted my head slightly. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "That was childish, Joy." I smiled, slow and unbothered. "No, that was contractual." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes flicked to the Yorkie curled up beside me, the same one from earlier in the lobby. He stirred, then settled his chin on my knee. "Guests are asking questions," she snapped. "They'll get answers, just not from me." For the first time all weekend, I saw her falter. "You're going to ruin everything," she said, her voice lower now. I shook my head. "You did that when you thought stealing my name was easier than giving me credit." She didn't have a comeback, just silence. And I didn't fill it for her. She turned stiff and walked away, heels clacking against the flagstone path, each step more frantic than the last. I leaned back against the tree trunk, watching as lanterns flickered overhead. The chaos behind the walls of the reception wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the ones who built it without me, who edited me out like I was an inconvenience. The Yorkie nudged my hand again. I patted his head gently. "You don't owe anyone anything just because you're quiet," I murmured to him, though it was just as much for me. For the first time that day, I smiled. And meant it. I had the truth, and the receipts to back it up. I woke the next morning to the muffled sound of polite chaos. Voices outside the suite echoed through the hallway, tight, sharp, clipped in that particular tone people use when trying not to panic in formal clothes. For a moment, I let myself stay still. The sheets around me were tangled, and the pillow smelled like hairspray and hotel detergent. The Yorkie, now familiar, curled in a warm circle on the armchair by the window. Even he looked exhausted by it all. Eventually, I sat up, reached for my phone, and checked my email. The confirmation from the catering company had come through. Service terminated. Contract voided. Final payment revoked. No need for drama, just facts. By the time I made my way downstairs, the lobby was buzzing. I heard my name, or rather, a version of it, before I saw her. Joy had one responsibility, Marceline hissed to the planner, her jaw tight and shoulders squared. And now there's no brunch? What the hell am I supposed to tell everyone? The planner held up both hands. We only followed the legal order. It came with documentation. I don't care what it came with. Fix it. Her words stabbed the air with the same elegance as her French manicure. But the food never arrived, not a single plate. The courtyard had been set beautifully. White linen cloths, mason jars of wildflowers, monogrammed menus with "Love is served," embossed in gold. Only there was no food to match the message. Guests milled around with coffee and awkward conversation. One couple had clearly just realized their flight wouldn't wait forever. I kept my distance. A few bridesmaids avoided my gaze. One offered a tight smile, the kind you give when you're not sure whose side you're on yet. It wasn't until I returned to my room that I saw it. Another text. From my mother. What you're doing is childish. You're humiliating us. Family reputation is more important than your pride. I stared at those words longer than I should have. Childish. Pride. Reputation. I could hear her voice in my head, saying the same thing when I cried at a birthday party I wasn't invited to, when I stayed quiet about being left out of Christmas plans, when I asked why no one came to my college graduation. They never used fists. They used language and expectation. I typed back, "You taught me not to raise my voice, so I pulled the plug instead." I didn't wait for a reply. I packed my things slowly, deliberately, folded my dress, zipped my shoes into the bottom pouch of my luggage, slipped the hotel key card into the side pocket of my purse. Then, just before heading out, I stopped by the front desk. "Hi," I said. "Room 306, Joy Garrow, checking out." The concierge tapped a few keys, then frowned slightly. Sorry, ma'am. I'm not seeing your name under the wedding party. Are you with the vendor group?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" She smiled kindly, assuming this was a mix-up. "The bridal suite submitted a revised list this morning. Your name isn't listed, so I'm just trying to place where your charges fall." My stomach didn't drop. It calcified. They didn't just want to ignore me. They wanted me erased. "I'm not with the vendor group," I said calmly. "But thank you." Outside, I stood on the hotel steps, suitcase in hand, letting the sun hit my face for a beat longer than necessary. It was already warm, too warm for wool or pretending. I looked at my reflection in the glass doors. They took my seat. Then they took my name. And now, they'd tried to take my existence. But I was still standing, still breathing, still here. I pulled out my phone, not to scroll, not to complain, but to act. I opened a group contact folder I hadn't touched in years. College friends who now worked in law, nonprofit boards, event equity. I tapped 3 names, then 5, then 7. This wasn't about brunch anymore. This wasn't even about me. It was about how easily stories like mine got deleted in real time by people who smiled while they did it. If they can rewrite history, I whispered to my reflection, I can rewrite legacy. I tucked my phone away, stepped down onto the sidewalk, and kept walking. And some echoes don't fade. They transform. By midday, I was back near the venue, not because I needed to be there, but because I chose to be. Not to witness anything, but to finish what I started. The chaos had quieted into something more dangerous, speculation. Not from the family, of course. They were still spinning, trying to locate the leak. But the internet had already done what it always does best: dig, connect, and devour. It started with a short clip. A wedding guest had taken a casual video of me in the lobby the day before, juggling 4 leashes and holding a boxed meal in my lap. The caption read, "Turns out the woman holding the dogs paid for the wedding. Family made her the pet sitter." 23 seconds. That's all it took. I watched the clip go from a handful of likes to over 10,000 in under 2 hours. The comments hit faster than I expected. Is this real? How do people do this to their own? Her face is what quiet betrayal looks like. I didn't share the video. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. When truth is quiet and recorded, it becomes undeniable. Around 2 p.m., I returned to the venue with one purpose: not to confront, not to rejoin, just to deliver. The wedding coordinator was standing near the loading bay, clipboard tucked tight against her chest. Her eyes widened when she saw me approach. "I won't stay," I told her. "But can you give this to Marceline?" I handed over the envelope. It wasn't thick, just enough to carry what mattered. Inside, a printed copy of the original catering contract, all receipts attached to my name, a formal service withdrawal notice, and a handwritten note that read, "Don't confuse silence with surrender." The coordinator nodded, unsure what to say. I turned and walked away before she could think of anything. By the time evening arrived, I was already halfway back to my hotel. I turned off notifications, silenced calls, but not before one text slipped through. From Elise, the planner. "You know they're scrambling, right? A reporter called about the video." I didn't reply. Back at the hotel, I watched it all unfold from a distance. The brunch was canceled. Guests left early. My mother texted the family group chat a photo of the couple cutting cake, with a caption that read, "Let's focus on the love, not the noise." But it was too late. The noise was louder than the violinists she hired for ambiance. And for once, I wasn't the one they muted. That night, as I prepared to leave Savannah, I took one last walk past the reception hall. The lights were dimmed, and the staff were folding chairs, clearing flower petals from the lawn. I moved quietly, not because I was hiding, but because I had nothing left to prove. As I turned the corner toward the main drive, I heard small footsteps behind me. It was Zoe, my cousin's daughter, barely 12, still in her ballet flats and floral dress. She looked up at me and held out a phone. "Is this you?" she asked. It was the video. Of course it was. I nodded. "I thought you were just helping," she said. I smiled softly. "I was." She stepped forward and hugged me. "You were brave." I hugged her back, breathing in the simplicity of her honesty. No filter, no agenda. Brave would have been walking away sooner, I told her, not bitterly, but truthfully. She handed me a bracelet, beads spelling out joy in bright plastic letters. "I made this before the wedding," she said, "but no one told me where to find you." I took it like it was gold. "Thank you, Zoe. You found me just fine." As Zoe ran back toward her mom, I slipped the bracelet into my pocket. It clinked against my hotel keycard like it belonged there. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back at the venue one last time. That place had seen enough of me, or maybe never really saw me at all. 2 days later, I was back in Austin. The air was different, less staged, more honest. I walked into my apartment, dropped my luggage near the front door, and stood there in the quiet. No lingering perfume from strangers, no folding chairs, just hardwood floors, soft lighting, and the hum of my fridge. Mine. That morning, while folding laundry, my phone rang. Dad's name lit up the screen. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Part of me expected the silence to just swallow the moment whole, but I answered. "Hey," he said, his voice careful, like he wasn't sure if he'd dialed the right version of me. I waited. "Your mom asked me to call." I almost smiled at how predictable that line was. "We didn't handle things the way we should have," he continued. "We should have done more." I stayed quiet. He added, "You were right, but you should have said something earlier." My voice came out steady. "I've said it for years. You just didn't listen." He didn't argue, didn't push back. There was a pause, and then he mumbled something about taking care of himself, said goodbye, and hung up. That call wasn't for me. It was for them, and I didn't feel better. But I didn't feel responsible either, and that was new. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop and logged into a platform I used for work, part messaging hub, part scheduling. I needed something normal, something that wasn't tied to flower arrangements or name tags. While waiting for files to sync, I scrolled through social media just out of habit. And that's when I saw it. Family, wedding weekend. That was the caption, posted by Marceline. Same photo style as always, white vignette filter, curated smiles. Mom, Dad, the new in-laws, bridesmaids. Even the Yorkie was there. Except me. At first glance, it looked like I'd just stepped out of frame. But then I saw the shoulder seam. Mine. Cropped. Clean. Intentional. I didn't zoom in. I didn't save it. I didn't send it to anyone. Instead, I powered off the phone and placed it upside down on the counter. They could crop me from pictures, but not from memory. Not from facts. And certainly not from the truth I now owned in full. The next morning, I sat by my desk, cleaning out my inbox. I deleted over 200 unread wedding emails, vendor quotes, music preferences, seating charts. It felt like erasing chalk from a board that no one else had ever written on. A friend called during my second coffee. "You didn't leak the video to press, right?" she asked, her voice part curious, part admiring. "No," I said gently. "Didn't need to." There was a pause and she laughed. "Classy." My coworker popped her head into the room. 10 minutes to pitch. "Got it," I said. I stood, smoothed my shirt, checked my lipstick in the darkened laptop screen, and grabbed my notes. I belonged here. After the call, with the meeting wrapped and my adrenaline finally settling, I opened a journal app I hadn't touched in months. There it was. An unsent letter. Addressed to Marceline. I clicked it open. "You erased me, but I won't spend my life trying to write myself back in." I hovered over the delete button, then clicked it. She didn't deserve the weight of my words, not anymore. Maybe she never did. I stood, walked to the window, and opened it. The wind outside smelled like jasmine and something warmer, like relief. I wasn't healed, not entirely, but I was whole, and that was enough. I was never too sensitive. I was just too silent, until silence became my strongest voice.